Hello everyone, B.O.B. here, and welcome to another Minecraft tutorial. And today, well, it's kind of a tutorial bundle. So I recently had a request to do a sorting system. The subscriber wanted something cool that would work well with AFK farms and also mass storage systems. And, well, I mean, I found it kind of challenging because there's only so much you can do as far as making a sorting system that's compact. I mean, sorting circuits have to be a certain size in order to work properly, and we're actually going to talk about that here in just a few minutes. But rather than customizing my own sorting system and doing a tutorial on it, I thought, why not focus on the individual circuits that help us to sort and move items around, and I'll teach you how to build a few of those and talk about how and why they work. And this can help you to customize your very own sorting system. So first and foremost, a sorting system needs to sort, right? To do that, we need item filters. And what you see in front of me here are two different item filters. Now, the one on the left, this is a design from Impulse SV, and the one on the right comes from Silent Whisper. And I do intend on linking both of their videos on sorting systems in the description down below in case you're interested in checking those out. But the reason I'm showing you two of them is, well, reportedly, Impulse's circuit here isn't all that reliable on Bedrock. I don't believe that that's still true. I think at one time there was inconsistencies with how hoppers would pull items from chests, and that's no longer a thing. It'll now remove one stack at a time from left to right the way it does in Java Edition or the old PlayStation Edition. So in my testing, these circuits are still completely reliable. Uh, I mean, if you want to do your own testing and research, that's up to you. This is probably the circuit I would typically go with because it's a little bit cheaper than Silent Whisper's design. However, Silent Whisper's design is more compact. I mean, ever so slightly. It's one block. But also, I mean, it is known to be 100% reliable on the Bedrock Edition. So if you're not sure, you don't really want to trust Impulse SV's design, I'm going to teach you how to make this one as well. And they're both very, very simple. Now, just to demonstrate that these are completely tileable, I'm going to go ahead and tile these up right next to the demonstration models I got right in front of us. So, to start off, we're going to want our chest. I'm going to go ahead and place a double chest right here, and this is going to be our main output chest where everything's getting sorted into, and then we want a hopper feeding into that chest. And we're going to want another hopper above that hopper, but we don't want it feeding directly down. If you see this hopper here, it's kind of feeding off into midair. So how we're going to achieve that is we're going to crouch place a block on top of this chest, and then we're going to place a hopper feeding into that block. And of course, we're going to want to get rid of that block because otherwise we can't open the chest. What you could do is have a transparent block sitting here, maybe upside down staircase or glass block. Whatever it may be to cover up the backside if that's something you choose to do. Um, I guess glass wouldn't cover it up. You know what I mean. But moving on with the circuit, this is real simple. We're going to start off with just a block here on the bottom. And then we're going to have a repeater sitting on that block. And we're going to have that pointing in the direction of the chest. Have that repeater drawing a signal from a solid block as well as feeding a signal into a solid block. And then we want a redstone torch on the opposing side of the block that the repeater is feeding into. Now let's climb up on top here. Well, if I can do it. Then we need some solid blocks for this top part. So just 1, 2, 3. We're going to come up here right next to our hopper and draw a signal from that hopper with a comparator. You can see it's drawing the signal from the top hopper. And then just 3 dashes of redstone dust. 1, 2, 3. And you can see the dust links together on these, but that's okay because, well, the way it works, it won't really matter if the redstone signal is traveling over one block. But that's it. That's the whole circuit in place. All we have to do is set up the filter. So here's how you would set up that filter. What you would need is, for each of these circuits, you would need at least 4 custom named items. So anything you have an abundance of that you can rename on an anvil. That's what we're going to use for this part. And then the item that you want to sort itself, and you want at least 42 of these. And here's how you'll do it. You'll take that custom named item and you'll want to put one of those in each of these 4 slots on the right hand side of the hopper here. So let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, and then these 42 items of whatever it is we're trying to sort, we're going to go ahead and put that in the first slot. Now as soon as we put it in, it will drop to 41. And what happened was that one item fell out of that hopper and it got locked in this hopper below. The reason that is because when items in a hopper exceed 45, the redstone signal that is compared from said hopper reaches a power of 3, meaning it will send that signal up to 3 blocks. Just so happens that our sorting filter circuits are designed to be 3 blocks long. So whenever we exceed that 45 items inside that hopper, it's going to power this last block down here, which is going to power the repeater, which is going to turn off this redstone torch, which is going to unlock that hopper, allowing any items over the 45 to just flow straight through. Now, being that we're relying on a number of 45 items to be inside the hopper in order for these filters to work, there is a little bit of flex here. And what I mean by that is you can adjust the number of blocker items that you have in the 4 right-hand slots of the hopper. You can add more of those items in order to store less of the item that you want to sort inside of that hopper. However, whenever these circuits are tiled together, you may experience some issues with circuit filters set up like that not holding up the way they're supposed to, particularly in overflow situations. So if you're going to have them tiled together, I recommend having just the one item in each of the 4 slots on the right, and then yeah, you'll want your 42 initially items that you want to sort, but only 41 is going to get locked in this hopper. You'll have one locked in the hopper below. Now, Silent Whisper's design here utilizes the same exact game mechanics. We're relying on the 45 items in the hopper to open up the item filter. But as you can see, it's a slight variant in how it's built, so I'm going to show you how to do this. Same as Impulse's design, I'm going to tile it right up to the one I already got here. So let's start off with our chest in place. Hopper feeding into that chest. Here again, we want a hopper on top of that hopper, and we want the top hopper to be feeding into nothing. So let's go ahead, place our temporary block on top of this chest, have that hopper feeding into that temporary block. We get rid of that temporary block so we can get into our chest. Now the actual structure that the circuit is built on. So we're going to start with a solid block on the bottom here and just a dash of redstone dust on top of that. We're going to want a piston in between that solid block and your hopper array here. So let's to get that in place, I'm going to place in a temporary block, place in our piston right on top of that, and as you've seen, that was a regular piston, and we don't actually want this piston to extend at all, so let's put a piece of an obsidian on top of that. We're just basically using it to transfer our redstone signal, and we want that redstone signal to feed into this torch right here that we just placed. So basically what happens is whenever this dash of redstone dust gets powered, it's going to power the piston, which will shut off the torch. Same way Impulse's design worked, we're just eliminating the need for a repeater. So to finish off this circuit, let's go ahead and on the opposing side of this redstone dust, we need a solid block opposing that piston, of course. Then we want to come up on top of that redstone dust and place a glass block. Now let's come up all the way on top of our circuit here, and we're going to take a comparator signal from that very top hopper like we did in Impulse's design, and then run a redstone line down to the end of the structure just like we did in Impulse's design. Now the difference is we only need 2 of the redstone dust on top because it's actually going to travel underneath this glass, and the third block is the one right here on the bottom. And as you can see, the filter inside this hopper is, like I said, set up the same way as Impulse's design. You have your 4 custom items on your right, as well as the 41 items in the first slot on the left, and we would have one of those items locked in the hopper down below. Now, being that these are tiled together, of course, you're going to want to sort more than just 2 items, and you need to move your items across the top of those hoppers in order to be filtered out. So you would do something like this right here, and I have just a display model. Now these few items are actually being sorted by Impulse SV's design, and these few items by Silent Whisper's design. And how we're moving those items across those hoppers is just another hopper chain. You can see they're all just feeding one hopper, feeding into the next, all the way to the end. The reason why this works is because when you have hoppers stacked on top of one another, the item passing through the hopper chain always tries to go down before it tries to go out. This is why the individual filter circuits work. Um, so when you have these hopper chains coming across the top of your individual item filters, those items are going to try and go down into them filters, but if they cannot, if it's not cobblestone, it cannot go into this hopper below. Therefore, it's going to go to the next hopper, and it's going to try and go down first. But if it cannot, it's going to go into that next hopper, and so on and so forth. Now, in my inventory, I have 10 of each of the items that are being sorted in this system, as well as 10 items which are not. And I'm doing this just to give you a chance to see this thing in action. Let me go ahead and just throw all these things in here. And if we take a look down underneath, you can see the torches are slowly turning off as the items are passing through that need to be sorted. There we go. There's a better demonstration, better example of it. Yep. See, one by one, each of these items that I placed inside there are being filtered out and put into their appropriate chest. As you can see, whenever Silent Whisper's design kicks in, the torches on his tend to flash, and that's because there's no repeater, so there's no delay on that whole well, less of a delay on when that torch actually turns off and on. Um, but I do believe it is all done sorting, and there's our 10 items which were not being sorted. If we look in all the rest of these chests, everything got the appropriate item inside it. Even looking in Impulse SV's design, all appropriate items. And here we were only stacking 10 of each, or sorting 10 of each item because I didn't want that demonstration to last all day. But as you can see, it does all seem to work just fine. So, I mean, it's kind of whatever filter you choose. I like I said, I kind of like Impulse's design. It's just a little bit cheaper. I'd rather not have to mine out an obsidian block for every item filter in my sorting system. So as you can see, these systems do tend to be a bit tall, with the main input chest about 4 blocks above your head. That's not exactly ideal, nor is it attractive. You'd want to maybe have something from like eyesight level, or eye level, or even the ground floor, a chest that you could just drop things into, right? And then you'd have to move the items up. Well, that's where the next part of this tutorial comes in. Now what I have here are two different types of item elevators, and actually I have two different auto dropper circuits feeding into these item elevators, but we're not going to focus on these just yet. We're going to look at those in a minute. Right now I want you to focus on the actual build, the structure itself. We're going to start with this one on the left. Now this is just a solid block item elevator. Now this is a 3x3 cylinder, basically. Well, I don't want to say cylinder because it's, cubicle. But as you can see, these are all just solid blocks the whole way through. And how this works is the game mechanics that whenever an item is, well, forced in between two blocks, it's going to pathfind its way up to find an empty area. So let me grab a stack of blocks here and just throw in this auto dropper circuit. Throw it right in the dropper there. So you can see they're all aligned to just come straight up into that water stream and then get washed down into this hopper. Advantages of this design is, of course, well, how clearly you can see through it. And also, you don't need the water sources to go all the way up through like you would with the bubble tube. Now, the bubble tube elevator, well, it is a little bit trickier to build. Well, for starters, you're going to need soul sand at the bottom. Well, technically, you don't need the soul sand, but in order to get the appropriate amount of speed out of the items traveling up, you would want the soul sand. And that's the whole reason you would go with a bubble tube rather than just the solid block elevators. Oh, and speaking of, these don't have to be glass blocks in these solid block elevators. It could be literally any block you want. It just needs to be full blocks, so that way the items kind of get sent up through to the block above. Anyway, back to the bubble tube. Uh, as I was saying, they're a little bit trickier to build. For starters, you need the soul sand. In order for the bubble tube to be effective, you need to have a water source block in every part of the tube leading up to the top. If you can't just like dump water on the top and let it flow down, or else the bubbles won't actually travel all the way up. Also, right before the top, you want to leave a gap, a block of air. As you can see, I got the sign there holding the water back, and then another water stream on top of that to redirect the items. So let me grab some items here. And I'm going to drop this in this auto dropper circuit. And look how fast those things shoot up to the top. Now, granted, this is a faster clock, so the items are being spat out a lot faster, but they're traveling a lot faster once they are spat out. This is the reason I actually prefer the bubble tube elevator, even though it's a little bit more complicated to build. If you were sending the items up a very far distance, this would be the fastest way to do it. Now, about those auto dropper circuits that allow those item elevators to work. We're gonna take a look at the two different ones that I built here, and then there's other ways to do these as well. These are just the ones that I use most frequently. For starters, it's this one. What we're doing is just comparing a signal from the dropper itself, feeding into a solid block, pulling that signal from that solid block with a repeater, feeding it back into the dropper as well as into the side of that comparator, and then that comparator set in subtract mode. So whenever items get put into this dropper, they will automatically trigger this little redstone clock, causing the dropper to spit all the items right back out. Okay, to build this circuit, we're going to start out with our dropper here. We're going to compare a signal from that dropper, and we're going to have that signal feeding directly into a solid block. Now, this comparator, you're going to want that set in subtract mode, so you're going to want to make sure that little tiny torch is lit up. Um, then we're gonna want to pull a signal from that solid block with a repeater, and then have another repeater feeding back into the dropper. And then what we'll do is just take redstone dust and just kind of chain all of this together, and then make sure you feed that redstone signal back into the side of that comparator as well. And there you go, auto dropper circuit set up, ready to go, fully operational. Now, this auto dropper circuit is the one you saw set up underneath my bubble tube item elevator, and as you can see, it was a little bit faster than the other one. And this thing is really, really simple to build. We got our comparator comparing our signal from our dropper, feeding into a solid block. The solid block is Bud powering a sticky piston with an observer on its face, which, when that sticky piston extends, will trigger an observer clock, which feeds right back into that dropper. Let me show you how we do it. Starting with our dropper already in place, let's go ahead and compare that signal. We have our solid block already in place as well. So we can just go ahead and place a sticky piston right next to that solid block, coming back in the direction. Oh, that's not a sticky piston. That's a sticky piston. Coming back in the direction of our dropper. And then we're going to come over here and we're going to look over our comparator and place an observer right on the face of that sticky piston. So you should see that observer's little redstone bum pointing out right there. And then we're going to come over here one block away from the dropper, but facing in the opposite direction. We're going to want our other observer. And that's it. So whenever items get placed inside this dropper, the piston extends, triggering this observer clock, causing the items to get spat back out. One downside of this design, if you were to happen to unload the chunks while this is still emptying out, it could break this observer clock, and basically the piston would stay extended, the observers would stay facing one another, but they wouldn't be repeating the signal the way they're supposed to. Another downside is if you have a hopper system, which you more than likely would have, feeding into this dropper, and the items are only coming into the dropper one at a time, then that piston there is going to extend back and forth. And that will still trigger the dropper. I mean, the auto dropper circuit will still work. It's just going to be a little bit noisier and a little bit slower. But another benefit to this design is that it can be built vertically in any direction you want. You see, this is the same exact circuit. It's just built up and down. You got our dropper on the bottom. We're comparing our signal feeding into a solid block, which is powering a sticky piston, which will extend this observer, causing an observer clock to be triggered. Same thing on this side with the dropper on the top here. we can compare that signal feed into a solid block. Now, being that we would have some bud powering issues, we had to put a glass block underneath that comparator and then a solid block underneath that dropper. Uh, this is, preventing. Basically, what would happen is we would create a clock that we wouldn't be able to shut off. Now, these auto dropper circuits can be used for more than just sending items up. Of course, you could drop items down because, I mean, droppers, but also you use them to feed water streams to transfer items that way. If you need to move things horizontally, and I have a little demo water stream set up here, and let me just go ahead and just pop one item in this dropper for now. I want to show you. See, it gets spat out. It'll work its way around corners, across the ice, and things like that. You don't necessarily need to have ice underneath, but in situations like this, where it would have slowed down right here at the corner, it would help to get it to glide the whole way across, being that that's ice there rather than a solid block. But I left this like this to let you know, don't do this. Obviously, you couldn't put a sign here and then the next water stream right here and expect it to continue, because the parts are going to just get stuck right there. You also can't put the sign in the corner, because here again, the parts would just get stuck right there in the corner. So you would actually want to cut this water stream short before the corner, put your sign right there, and then you could put your water source in the corner like so, and that would continue off the water stream. So now if I come over here and I place an item, let me fly while I do this so we can try and follow it. I'm going to place this item inside the water stream. It's working its way around across the water stream all the way around into the hopper. This is a great way to move items. I mean, they can get moving pretty fast. Water streams are a great way to move things around. One thing is, you'll notice I have this kind of capped off for the most of it. I only left part of it open so I could show you what you want to do when you encounter corners in the wrong place. But you do want to have these types of things completely closed in, not only to prevent things from falling into it, but also to prevent things from popping out. Now, another way to move items horizontally, well, and I guess also vertically with this method, is of course the hopper minecart. Well, chest minecart is what we're going to use here, and I do recommend always using a chest minecart rather than a hopper minecart if your goal is to transport a large sum of items. And there's a couple different reasons why you would do that, and I'll explain those here in a minute. But just to show you how this works. You don't, well, you've probably seen people just letting their minecarts roll back and forth all the time. This this is not exactly recommended, as well, if you were to unload those chunks, you could experience that minecart just disappearing entirely along with everything inside of it. So the best situation is to have your minecart sitting in a station, a loading station, to be sent off as soon as it gets loaded, have it drop off items, and then be sent back as soon as those items are dropped off. And that's what the circuits I have set up here are intended to do. So let me go ahead and just throw these few sticks inside this chest. Once all these sticks work their way down into that chest minecart, it gets sent over. Those sticks are getting dropped down through this hopper and fed into this chest, and once those are all done, it gets sent back. And these are really simple circuits to do. Okay, so I got a little mock-up minecart track here so I could show you how I built these circuits. And to start with, of course, in the stopping points, you want a powered rail. And then, this is going to be the loading circuit. So above that powered rail, you'll want a hopper. And obviously, that's what's going to feed into our minecart there. And we're going to need to compare a signal from that hopper, and then we need to actually send that signal further than what one item would allow us. So we're going to actually pull that signal from that comparator with a repeater. Now we want that repeater fitting into a solid block, so I'm going to place a temporary there, and we're just going to break away that temporary after we place our solid block on top of it. And then we want one block below, so we got this little gap in between, and we're going to need a dash of redstone dust right there inside of that gap. Now below this beside this bottom block here, we're going to build my new favorite falling edge monostable circuit. So just have a sticky piston facing up with an observer sitting on top of that sticky piston with its little redstone bump facing back towards our track system. Now, right beside that sticky piston, we want, and this, by the way, is in itself is a falling edge monostable circuit. So we'll pull our signal from there, and we're going to do that with a repeater. We're going to have that repeater set to 4 ticks. Let's go ahead and click that 3 times, and then we just need to send a signal into a block right here beside your track. So we'll just do that by placing a few solid blocks and adding a dash of redstone dust. So now, whenever items pass through this hopper, it's going to extend this piston. And then whenever items are finished passing through the hopper, the piston's going to drop. And then that drop is going to cause this observer to send off a 1-tick pulse into this repeater, which would then power the track. The reason why this is a falling edge monostable circuit is because you're getting that 1-tick pulse at the end of the signal. And we're going to do the same sort of circuit over here. It's just going to be a little bit rearranged. So what you'll want to do is start off by placing your powered rail on top of your hopper here. You see we got the hopper feeding into a chest. And then we need to compare a signal from that hopper, have that signal being fed into a solid block with a sticky piston beside that solid block. We then want an observer on top of that sticky piston and a solid block right beside it, so we can take a repeater and feed into this solid block at the end of the track here. This repeater as well, you want that set to 4 ticks, so go ahead, set it down, click it 3 times, and this is it. You got your sending circuit in place, your receiving circuit in place. Let's go ahead and place our chest minecart into place. And I'm just gonna go ahead and place items in this hopper. Well, let me grab more than just one. Let me grab a couple of these. So grab 8 sticks. I'm gonna go and throw all 8 sticks into this hopper. As soon as they all drop out of that hopper, the cart gets sent off over into this little unloader. Gets unloaded. Everything ends up in here. One thing to keep in mind, like I said, always use a chest to transfer items, mainly because you don't want this hopper to be left full. If there's items left in this hopper that cannot fit in this chest, that cart's never going to get sent off because that signal is never going to turn off. So yeah, basically you never want to send more than 1 small chest worth at a time. And if you had a hopper minecart in here, well, you would only be able to move 5 stacks at a time. That's not very efficient. Okay, so we know how to move our items around. We know how to sort our items. Now we just need to talk about how storing our items. Now, what I have set up here are just a few examples of very, very simple storage silos. This is probably the most commonly used. I like to offset the chest at the top, and the reason why is because you would typically have these sort of silos underneath your item filters, and then you'd have that redstone torch that locks your item filter. It would end up powering more hoppers than it's intended to if these were all in a line. So yeah, you just offset that top chest, and it's going to keep that redstone torch away from your silo system, and then that should prevent clogging issues. But the way these work is, of course, the items all try and travel down before traveling into the chest. Once a chest gets full and the items can no longer travel down, well, then they'll start traveling into the chest above. I don't like these systems so much because if, say, you manage to fill up a couple of these chests and then you empty out the lower chest, well, there's still going to be items stuck in the top chest. I prefer to build something a little bit like this. We have everything staggered. You see we still have that one hopper sticking out further to prevent any sort of locking issues. But the way this is set up, everything should flow to the lowest chest. So all you would have to remove from is this lower chest. Of course, this doesn't look as good, right? Obviously, but I mean, I would probably just build something like this in, and then just make the bottom chest accessible somehow. Uh, I just like the idea of everything's going to the same place. This last little example here is just basically the same thing I have here. The first example, I just have them laid out side to side so I could put in indicator lights to let us know when each of these chests are full. And how these indicators are working is they're actually using comparators to compare signals from the hoppers behind the chest. So when items get stored in the hopper, it'll actually power the block behind the redstone lamp, turning on the redstone lamp. Now, I would like to give you a more detailed tutorial on how to build one of these things, but well, we are very much over time for this video. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know in the comments below, and maybe we could do a video about just that. Also, I have videos about shulker box loaders and unloaders coming up, and that all kind of ties in with this whole theme. But that was also another thing that I just couldn't fit into this video due to timing issues. So that's going to be probably my next tutorial to come out. So keep an eye out for that. To wrap up this video, I just built a small example of how you might, you know, well, design one of these sorting systems. Um, as you can see, I have a bubble tube item elevator feeding into the sorting system. Rather than using item frames to mark what's in each chest, I actually put in the blocks that are corresponding to the items in the chest. This would actually help reduce lag and things because, too many item frames would cause lag. Obviously, you couldn't do this with every single block in the game or every single item, but doing it with the solid blocks or at least the blocks that you can place into the world could save as far as lag. Another way to prevent lag, your top hopper chain. You see I have one right here across the top, and you'll notice I have solid blocks all the way across the top of them. That's because open hoppers are constantly looking for items above them to pull down into the hopper itself. And if there's a solid block on top, this prevents that action from happening. This is will indeed help reduce lag, especially if you have a huge sorting system set up. And that, my friends, completes today's video. And if you found it helpful, please do remember to hit that like button, as that sure does help me out a lot. And if you're interested in seeing more from me, considering that subscribe button, maybe that notification bell, so that way you'll know exactly when I release that video about shulker box loaders and unloaders. But in the meantime, I would like to thank each and every one of you for watching and wish you all a wonderful day.